Hey friends, it's that time again. Kenny Jahng here with Exponential's AI Next video series. Today I'm joined with my friend and colleague Brian Beauford from Grace Church in Boston. Welcome, Brian. How you doing?
What's up? How are you, buddy?
I just love collaborating with you and visiting you because I believe Grace Church is almost like a lab. It's a microcosm of exciting things that are going on. Why don't you share with everybody who doesn't know? That's great. That's grace.org is the website. Everyone should visit it right now and visit the church, one of the locations if you can. But share with us a little bit about Grace.
So we just celebrated our 19th birthday. I helped plant the church back when I was in college. I'm the executive pastor, and our heart is really just to see New England churched again. It's one of the least churched areas of the country, and our goal is to plant as many churches as fast as we can. So not just locations, although we do have 4 locations, but we've also planted 7 or 8 autonomous churches. And then in 2025, we'll be planting 3 autonomous churches, all from staff people that were here this last year. And they're all planting from Maine to Western Mass. So,
Wow, that's awesome. Like we love hearing multi-generational churches in terms of multiplication. Um, One of the reasons why I love visiting with you is because you are, and your whole team is has a forward-leaning posture into let's try new things. Let's fail fast forward in terms of an entrepreneurial mindset, meaning that let's be let's take the risk of trying new tools, new methods, new processes out there and see if it works. If it doesn't, let's abandon them and keep on moving to discover, right? You just got to keep on going until you discover the things that work. And AI has just been the latest thing that I've seen you embrace very well in so many different use cases. One of the things, though, for today's conversation is we want to make sure that everyone is going back to almost like square one and taking the sweet spot of these large language models and understand, wow, how can we use it on a very practical basis? And that is taking your long form content, your sermons that you produce week
yeah.
in, week out, and then repurposing them for other uses. And so we were talking briefly before, Brian, that we live in a YouTube world now, right? It's like the average view of a YouTube video is around hovering around 4 minutes, but the average church that posts their video is, I don't know how long is the average sermon video that gets posted these days, Brian?
I don't know. My team would like it to be around 35 minutes, but our average is probably more like 50 minutes. So,
Yeah. And so you can imagine if people are abandoning videos and don't get to the 5 minute mark, my test when we go in mystery shop or we talk with pastors like, hey, let's bring up your own church's website. Let's go to your sermon pages because that's where you are presenting it to the outside world. And let's play the first 4 minutes, get to 5 minutes, cut it off, right? We're going to hit back. We're going to, on the browser,
yeah.
get out of that page. Did we get to anything meaningful in that first 4 minutes? Usually it's not.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest opportunities I see is to actually create derivative content from your long form content and present it alongside complementary to the long form content there so that people get a taste of it. And as we say in marketing, almost build a micro funnel. So if you think of a wide top to a base that, hey, they might do samples of short form content at the top, get more interested into medium length, and then get to the long form content, right? You're reeling them in to the long form content. And there's tons of other places to use content that you're repurposing. So how many sermons would you say you have in your sermon archive on your church website, Brian?
Gosh, I don't know. Probably goes back 5 years at
Hundreds,
least.
right? It's
Yeah.
hundreds.
I think to um, echo or mirror back what you're talking about with the YouTube, we're all living in kind of a YouTube
Yeah.
um, content generation, but I think it's actually shifted the way that people learn. Um, if you go back 20 years or whatever, people understood that you'd make some kind of relational connection to the teacher through a story, then you'd get into something,
Yeah.
then you dive a little bit deeper. But now with YouTube, I mean, you want something, you want to know what's in it for me within the first 30 seconds, right? When you click on something, if I am trying to fix, I have a leaky faucet in my bathroom. If I'm trying to fix my leaky faucet and I go to a YouTube and I search how to fix my leaky faucet, and the guy starts with, well, 3 years ago on vacation, my daughter cut her toe, and you're like, what are you talking about? I need to fix my leaky
Yeah.
faucet, right? So I think the same thing is happening with sermons. I think we need to flip that script a little bit and say you can go into that story, but you should start with some kind of hook, some kind of thing that says, here's why you should pay attention for the next 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah. That word, the hook, is really important, right? The best practice in short form content and reels and stories and social media is to focus on getting people interested and leaning forward. That posture of leaning forward is the most important thing. And so it's no longer, hey, let's hide the big thing and just put the reveal at the end. It's actually revealing the actual core ideas that you're trying to put forward, that
Yeah.
they get interested in it, and then they're much more interested in how it unfolds. That as you unpack that, what is the resonance and the relative importance it is to their own life. So, in this session, we're just going to run through several different use cases of taking long form content. So, say your long form video sermon, whether that's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 4 minutes, 40 minutes long. And then what are the different types of contents that you can use? Now, we could use it on the Sermon Archive page, but there's so many different places in the content ecosystem that you'd be able to use all of these other form factors of content. And so I'll go first and talk through the easiest one. Is that if you have long form content, you can basically clip it down and create sermon clips, short form content. And the social media world that we live in just demands us to do that into a 15-second, 30-second, 1 minute, 3 minute versions of your sermon. So can you share your previous sermon clips that you've done before in preaching on your sermon page? But in terms of other mediums and other places, when we do sermon series, Brian, I sometimes forget what happened 3 weeks ago, or in today's world, people don't come every single week. Imagine if you
Right.
had the sermon clips of the highlights of last week's sermon played before the pastor comes on and starts preaching week 3 of the series or week 4 of the series, right?
Or even to use them in like an email follow-up that says, hey, get ready for this coming weekend. We're going to be starting week 2 of blank. Here's 5 review clips that
Yeah.
XYZ.
So I think we think of sermon clips for social media, but there's so many different other use cases that you can use them for. And once you start to think of those use cases, I think there are more types of clips that you would clip out of a long form content. So more than usually you'll have like 5 key points of a sermon. But I think you could get to a dozen or more different clips that could be used in different places in different ways once you start to be much more intentional of taking that video content and looking at it as a short form.
Yeah.
What else can we do with a sermon, Brian?
I know one thing that we're doing right now with the video, the transcript, we also upload just the raw notes that our different
Yes.
pastors use, is coming up with life group questions. And so we have, I know for us, we usually come up with those questions on Monday morning, and all the pastors, it's like the dreaded thing. They've moved on mentally
Yes.
to next week or 2 weeks from now, and to go back to the sermon they just preached. For our context, we have multiple services in multiple locations that speak live. And so they're like, I don't want to go back to this. I said everything I think I could say. I don't even know what to do. So we feed it through ChatGPT and Claude. We use a couple different ones just to come up with, we have a structure that we use for discussions, but break this up, dive deep, have some icebreaker questions, use some tangential verses that maybe we didn't use, but
Yeah.
we should have. And then we get this list of like 15 questions. And then the pastors just choose the best 6 that they want. And so that way it's taking exactly what they preached, which may be a little bit different than the notes that they had written down because they added some stuff, in the moment. But then taking that and what used to take hours on Monday because they have to brainstorm all this stuff really takes 15 minutes maybe. So
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think there was an idea that I had in one of the sessions I heard when we were talking about repurposing at a conference recently, is that they said, wow, once you have the discussion guide, what if you're associate pastors, or this is a great thing for your seminary intern on staff or something like that? What if you had two or more of your pastors just sit down and start to answer some questions that the AI would actually come up based on your long form transcript, right? And then record that, and that just becomes a YouTube show, right? On a weekly basis. It's very easy. It's very casual, almost like we're doing right now. We could literally bring up some questions and just queue them up one by one and say, "Hey, Brian, here's question number 2 from the sermon. What did you think about this point and this question? This right?" And so, I
yeah,
think just creating new avenues to both educate your people, disciple those that are following along in your, your leaders. There's so many different ways. There was one other example that came up with someone. They were creating these placemats, almost like printable placemats for young families, because their church preached the same message from the big adult church room as well as the kids' church on Sundays. And so everyone's talking about the same concepts, same ideas. And so they were creating these printable placemats with different boxes and different questions and things, riddles and things like that, that the parents could print out and have discussions over dinner. And now that could rapidly be produced by AI, and now you can even create images, right, that go along with all these things, right, Brian?
yeah, that's awesome.
So those are the things I think in terms of discussion guides, I think is just absolutely fantastic. You said creating the transcript. What is the favorite tool that you're using to create your transcripts right now?
Right now, we literally take the transcript from YouTube, that's auto generated, and then we just feed that back into AI to come up, take out all the timestamps and all that stuff, and then make it an actual document.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great affordable thing. That's one of the suggestions I make because people come up as like, we don't have huge budgets. How do you do all this stuff? But YouTube does it
Right.
for you, right? And so you should be uploading your sermons to YouTube. The other one I love is riverside.fm/transcription. So Riverside is a video interview podcasting platform, but they have a free service. You don't need a credit card. You don't even need an account or a login. You go to riverside.fm/transcription. As of now, you can upload an audio file or a video file, and it can transcribe the entire thing for you in, I think, over 100 different languages, actually.
And
And
it's pretty quick.
yeah, it's very quick and very accurate. And I love what you're doing is the two-step. Let's take that document, upload it to ChatGPT, Claude, or something like that, and ask it to clean it up. And now you can do a lot of things with it. I
Yeah,
love
we
that.
even take that and essentially ask it to make kind of like what a podcast notes would be, right? So it's putting in main points, it's putting in scripture references, it's formatting it how we want for our website. So
Yeah. Um, that kind of stuff, I think, is the sweet spot of a large language model because we're dealing with language, we're dealing with content, and that's just one of those great things. Okay, what else are you thinking about in terms of what is the sweet spot for AI with our sermon?
yeah, I mean, one thing that we're doing too now that I mean, we're doing it pre-service, but now after talking to you for a little while, I think we're going to actually start adding it to our website. But coming up with a list of questions that the spiritually curious person might have about this topic,
Yes.
and then literally listing those on the website, which I know you and I have read through this book called They Ask, You Answer, but it's this whole idea of whoever your target customer is, they have questions about whatever the topic is that you're talking about. So just address it. And so I think for us, we've been using AI to come up with what questions would a skeptic have?
Hmm.
Because I mean, let's face it, the fish doesn't know it's wet, right? We're so nose blind to being a Christian that we don't really even know what it's like to come from a skeptic's point of view. And so we use AI to help us figure that out. What does, this, given this topic, given our sermon notes or the transcript of what was preached, what would a skeptic have questions about? And then literally answering those, putting them
Yeah.
on the site.
That persona piece, asking ChatGPT to actually take on a persona, I think is just so important. We go through that in our ChatGPT for Churches.com course to really give you sounding boards, conversation partners. One of the other things that's related to this, Brian, I think, is to take that same persona of a skeptic or someone who's spiritually curious, someone who's exploring Jesus for the first time, and then using that point of view to basically respond to them and write some articles for your blog, right? Churches all pretty much have blogs. A lot of them have been abandoned, or it's not that important anymore in their marketing strategy. But long form content still works. And in the age of AI, where you want your content to be surfaced with AI responses now, you want to pump out content as much as possible. So creating an article based off of your transcript that answers the questions that skeptics might have, and then actually, and this is what I would recommend, Brian, is that Marcus Sheridan, They Ask You Answer Methodologies. The title of the blog should be the question
Yeah.
that someone would ask, right? What are they going to put into Google and ask? And so that would be the question, and then have that article answer that question based on the sermon. And then you can also say, hey, if you want to learn more, right? The whole point of all these repurposed pieces of content is to get them to the long form content, to get them more engaged.
Yeah, you want engagement. You want them to start with something small and then keep
Yeah.
digesting content. Now, before we hit record, you showed me something that you were doing personally that for your small group before you get there that I think every church should start doing. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, churches on Sundays. We just joined a new community group on Wednesday nights, and we're not using curriculum. We're going to discuss the actual sermons. And as you probably know, within the first 24 hours, you forget about 50% of the information you take in. If it's me personally, I probably forget 70% of the stuff that I hear on Sunday by Monday night. Tuesday night's even worse, and then by Wednesday you go in and you're like, what were we talking about? And you're not able to participate as much. And so what I've been doing is I've been using a tool called Google's Notebook LM, which is completely free if you have a Google account. And basically it allows you to upload audio, PDFs, text documents, up to 50 different files. So what I simply do is I take the audio file from the sermon that was preached on Sunday, I upload it to Notebook LM, and then I ask it to create a two-person podcast discussion that's an audio file. And it's incredible. It's all generated by AI.
I was about to say, describe that to people because these are two, it sounds like people having a conversation, but it's completely AI, but the discussion is all based around the actual sermon.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And the prompt that I actually put in, now it will auto-generate a summary discussion in terms of, going on its own, but it allows you to redirect it or, improve it. And so typically what I'll say is, this is the sermon that was preached on Sunday by Pastor Christian. I'm going to a community group on Wednesday evening. We discussed the sermon. Can you do me a favor and refresh my memory in this discussion of the key points that have come up in the sermon that would be discussed in a small group setting, and anticipate what are those things that might come into play. And it literally explicitly will say, hey, in today's episode, we know that you're going into a small group, your community group, and we wanted to just hit the highlights of Pastor Christian's sermon, and then it just goes. Typically, it's a 6 to 9 minute audio recording. If you prompt it again, like the last one I did, because it was a pretty heavy and interesting sermon, it produced a 20-minute sermon. And so imagine my use case is, what if you just played it in the car on the way as you drive to your community group, your small group, and when you walk in, you're refreshed. You have some ideas. You actually are able to contribute to the discussion as you walk in. So,
I'm going to start using that this week, at least testing it, and then literally, if we like it, post that audio
yes,
right underneath the video, right, with literally a headline, driving to life groups, play, the podcast
yes.
conversation or whatever about this week's message.
Now, I think the other thing that would be great, Brian, is to do another version of that that's aimed at the small group leader, the discussion leader, that says,
Oh, there
hey,
you go.
I want to, so we're going to have a community group and it's based on this sermon that I uploaded. I want to equip them so that they feel more confident and comfortable facilitating those discussions.
You could even add documents on like frequently frequent scenarios in life groups,
Yes.
right? Use that scenario and the message notes to say, hey, here's some potential hot button issues that might come up. You could probably even put announcements right in there so that now the podcaster, the fake AI podcaster, is also saying, don't forget to tell them that Christmas is coming up and blah, 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 blah.
Yes. Yeah, so there's so many.
That's awesome.
The other thing would be like if you knew in advance that you preached on a topic, a specific topic, and that you preached on that topic tangentially 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or even had one of your favorite preachers like Tim Keller, Rick Warren, Andy Stanley, or somebody had similar sermon topics. You can even upload those too and ask it for the leader, right? The leader version, I would say, I'm uploading these other versions other from other pastors or previous messages. You could reference them when the connection point helps support the discussion. So anyway, that's just one way that I think AI has a sweet spot for supporting discipleship and supporting your congregation as you go. And of course, you can publish it as a podcast externally, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, what's another good idea? There's so many different ideas.
Yeah, so this is another one that we're doing right now. We're doing it post, or we're doing it pre-sermon. If the pastor has their notes in beforehand, you could do this pre, but you could do it post as well, is taking the sermon notes and then creating a daily devotional or a Bible reading plan. So what we're doing right now is literally a Bible reading plan. We spent this whole 2024 going through the Bible as a giant overarching narrative. And so this next year, the people loved the reading plan. So we're sending out a Monday text with here's what to read Monday through Friday. And it gives them a couple chapters or depending on how big it is. But this next year, we're going to continue that. We have so many people that if we forget to send out the text, like if it goes out an hour late, we have tons of texts like, hey, where's the reading plan? Where's the
Wow.
reading plan? And so what we could do now is literally have that same reading plan, but post it on the website. If you really like this message, here's a 5-day reading plan that you could do post message to keep this going.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
and
we have about 14 or 1500 people that have opted in for this daily reading plan. Um, at first we did it as an experiment, thinking maybe we'll do it for the first couple months of the year. People loved it, and now they've requested that we keep going. So
just think about also the number of households with Alexa devices. And so you can actually create a what it's called an Alexa flash briefing. So you can program Alexa to prompt and say, hey, read me the news and the weather and XYZ, or you can do your own routine. Your church can create a flash briefing with that devotional. So every day it gets delivered. In fact, I think of a tool, Daily Dive 365, I think it's called. Daily Dive 365 is one that actually does that work with the AI. You basically put in the sermons, it creates the daily devotional and ships it, and it syndicates it to podcasts, but also to Alexa devices as well. Sermon Shots is another one that has that 5-day devotional thing. It's like push button, and all of a sudden comes out a 5-day devotional. So I love the fact that you're getting real traction on that, and it just shows you that
yeah,
the people want derivative content. They want help and support in that journey as they
for
go.
us, how we're posing it is we're doing it ahead of time. So what they start reading Monday through Friday is what we'll talk about that weekend. But you could do the same thing post that, right? Hey, we
Yeah.
just finished this over the next 5 days. We're going to email you out or text out a devotional that's going to add to what you've already experienced.
What about summaries? So again, taking long form content, condensing it down to short form is one of the best pieces. We talked about clips for the video portion, but text wise, you can create summaries of sermons so easily. I'm thinking immediately of like half a dozen ways that you can actually use that and repurpose it in different ways. Like, so for example, I'll give you one example, Brian, is that I think right now everyone should be using carousels, right? The carousels are back. Instagram has signaled it. How do you create those? It's time consuming, yada, yada, yada. Well, you can actually use AI to highlight 5 to 7 key points and then have associated either takeaways or calls to action or Bible verses that are connected and create the text for you for a visual summary carousel that you can then do on a regular basis. And then you have a catalog on your Instagram feed of all the topics that you have. And of course, one or two of the slides should point back to your website for the long form content or your podcast or other places to get different angles of that same content.
Yeah, and I know some people may be thinking like, "Oh man, I don't even know how to create something like that." But you could also use Canva,
Yeah.
right? That's another way to use AI to create something to get those summaries. But then Canva can also integrate with that and literally spit out the images for you. You don't really have to do much of anything.
Yeah. And speaking of
Um,
Canva, I would say sermon quotes and Bible verses, text over image, we call them quote cards, is a sweet spot that Canva is actually really good for, as well as AI chatbots like Claude and
yeah,
ChatGPT. So, like, we live in a world where the language is now visual, right? I always say video is the new black, but pictures are prime, and you want to use visual content whatever you can, and not just for social media, but for your email newsletters, for your email signature. What if on your website you actually created a sermon art gallery? What if you actually created a virtual prayer wall where people can reflect and pray on specific Bible verses that have come up on in your sermon? So many different ways I think you could use images actually across all of the publishing that you do out there.
yeah, I think too for the summaries. I mean, I know we touched on this a little bit, but blog posts would be great for this. And I know we created a custom GPT inside of Chat GPT that has our voice and tone, the language and phrases that we tend to use, our audience profiles. We also uploaded like some common questions they may have. And then literally we can upload the notes and say, write me, an article that speaks to a single mom about this topic, right? And then we get a blog post. But I think the other way you could do a summary, more of a meta, if you zoom out even more, is do a summary on the whole series that you just did,
Yeah.
right? So put in all 6 sermons into it and say, write me an article that summarizes all 6 of these sermons. I know for us, one of the things that's also working really well is long form content on Facebook specifically, right? So not just little posts, but like long form, almost like a blog post in Facebook. So you could do the same thing with that sermon is give me a long form social post that highlights this message that speaks to my audience, right? And it'll write this whole thing. Um, I think that could get lots of traction. Then on top of that, boost that post for $5 or $10. It doesn't have to be a lot, and see how much reach you can get in your community.
I love it. One of the last pieces that I would say is, and I know that we've had back and forth over the last couple of months on this one, is what if you actually used ChatGPT to identify all of the Christianese jargon, the insider language, the
Yeah,
buzzwords that we tend to use and forget, especially as we're talking to fellow Christians in our congregation? Those people that are spiritually open, that have not fully read the Bible yet, or are not steeped in Christian culture yet, sometimes we lose them, right? And I
yeah,
think I'm more sensitive to this because of my past experience as a church online pastor, Brian, where in-person church, right? It's almost like there's a shame culture. If you have a question, you can't raise your hand, you can't ask your neighbor. Everyone says, "Be quiet, shh," right? You're not supposed to
yeah,
talk in church. The converse is true, where if you talk to any church online pastor, they are depressed if you are not chatting in church. If the chat is dead during church, the church online pastor is really upset. All right. And what you'd see if you're actually monitoring the chat in church online is there are people who are new to the faith that are exploring Jesus and this whole Christianity church thing. And they have all these questions because there's buzzword bingo that happens in a sermon or on stage in announcements,
Yeah.
etc. And so creating a glossary of just definition of terms or links to other places where they can learn more about what is baptism, what's communion, what is, eschatology. My pastor talked about eschatology this week. What is that? It's like, so I think creating a glossary is something, again, that ChatGPT and all these chatbots, that's a sweet spot. It's easy to actually get it to do the work, to scan your entire transcript, identify anything that's out of the ordinary,
Yeah.
and then you can figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so let's zoom back out here, Brian, because so many people are thinking about how do we use AI, and this is, I think, one of the easiest places to start with. If someone's new, someone on your staff, one of the key volunteers, what's your best recommendation in terms of how do they get started? A lot of times people have fear. They have
Yeah.
these preconceived notions. It feels like technology. There's this huge, sharp learning curve. All these things in AI is happening so fast. There's a velocity to the news and things that we're hearing about. What would you say to the person watching here today that says, hey, I'm ready to dig in, but I just don't know where to start?
Yeah, I mean, start with the free options, right? ChatGPT or Claude. But then I would also add to that, and some of the people on staff, I've had to say this too, but then a lot of pastors that I've talked to, just try it. Just because it produces something doesn't mean you have to use it. So there's literally no harm, no foul in letting it do something. Um, like here's one that I haven't even told you about this one, right? It's a conversation with the machine. So what's the worst that could happen? It writes something that you don't like. Like it can't do anything. So one of the things that I did the other day was I said, uh, act as, or you are the God of the Bible from a conservative Christian point of view. Um, my pastor just talked about the creation story. What are we missing from your perspective about the creation story?
Mm.
And what should the Western church like? I just had an open conversation with this thing to figure out, is there anything that we're missing or talking about? So I think you can have a conversation with it. It sounds crazy to have a conversation with a machine, but that's literally what you're doing. But it there's no harm. There's no harm in trying it. There's no harm in uploading your sermon notes and say, just give it something. Take this sermon note and create small group questions for me. I know one of the things that we learned early on at one of the conferences you and I went to is when you get stuck, just ask AI, what questions should I be
Yeah.
asking you to get a better response? And then just literally answer those questions. Um, and so, yeah, there's no harm in trying it. It's not like it's doing anything in the real world. And so just for it to create some content, a blog or notes or discussion questions doesn't mean you have to publish them. Doesn't mean you have to use them. Doesn't mean you could trash the conversation after that. But I think the more times that you interact with the different AI models, the more comfortable you'll get with what it's producing. And then I know one thing you and I always say is use AI as a first draft. It's not a final draft, but use it. So most people are better editors than they are creators. And so that blank screen dilemma where you get paralyzed looking at the blank screen, let AI at least generate something for you to start with. Even if, 9 out of 10 are horrible, you might have one nugget of a good idea that comes from this. And you're like, oh, you know what? I could do it that way, or I could do it this way. And you're free now to do whatever it is that you were going to do. So
I love it. That's, I think, the best piece of encouragement that someone who's new can really have. And another version I say is like, look, at the end of the day, you can always delete it, right? You're not
yeah,
forced to use it.
there's no harm.
Yeah, there's no harm. So that's our appeal to you. Hopefully, this has proven to be valuable for your time in terms of walking through some of these specific concrete use cases. If you want to get more details, you can go ahead to a great resources that we set up called repurposeyoursermon.com. We actually walk through over-the-shoulder videos recreating every single one of those types of content pieces that we talked about with Brian, as well as other types out there. So you can actually follow along and see how specific examples are made, and then get inspiration to use the AI tools to actually go even further yourself. So thank you so much for joining us, Brian. If someone wants to follow and learn more about what you are doing to equip pastors and also your work at Grace, what are some of the ways that people can follow up with you and learn more about the resources that you're producing to equip pastors even further?
Yeah, if you go to brianbeauford.com, Brian, and then Beauford is Beauford. That has a lot of the stuff that I'm into, a few articles that I've written about AI. Our church is that'sgrace.org. And then the main stuff where I'm putting most of my energy right now is productivepastor.com. And it's literally helping pastors get out of the office, spend more time with people. And a lot of that is AI focused. So
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Brian. And for those of you that have been watching, we'd love to get your feedback and just tell us what has been the thing that has resonated with you most out of today's session. And then what are the questions that this has set up so that we can actually explore them further here at AI Next. I'm Kenny Jahng. We'll see you in the next video here at Exponential.